Louis Quilico was one of the leading operatic baritones of the 20th century. His sudden passing on July 15th, 2000 was a great loss to the musical world. Quilico performed at many of the world's great opera houses: Covent Garden, the Paris Opera, the Bolshoi, and the Vienna Staatsoper, to name only a few. He was a stalwart of the Metropolitan Opera, appearing nearly 300 times over 25 consecutive years. At the Met, he sang under the baton of James Levine, Zubin Mehta, Richard Bonynge and Claudio Abbado, and alongside tenors including Luciano Pavarotti, Placido Domingo, John Vickers and José Carreras, and sopranos Joan Sutherland, Renata Tebaldi, Renata Scotto, and Beverly Sills. Louis Quilico was an ideal interpreter of the great Italian and French composers, but it was his defining portrayal of Rigoletto, the hunchbacked jester in Verdi's tragic masterpiece, that won him international acclaim, as well as the nickname Mr. Rigoletto. He sang the role more than 500 times, the last being at the National Arts Centre in Ottawa in September of 1994. After his retirement from the operatic stage in 1998, he continued to perform, touring extensively with his wife, the celebrated pianist Christina Petrowska Quilico. Together they made 4 recordings and a teaching video, and collaborated on the book Mr. Rigoletto in Conversation with Louis Quilico. In this book, Quilico shared his views on singing, on opera, and on his signature role, Rigoletto. He also talked about his own personally devised vocal techniques, sharing them with a new generation of singers. What is missing in the printed version of these conversations is Quilico's own voice and his unique personality. In these recordings, we hear him speak in his own words, with his own voice, unfiltered and unedited. Speaking personally, baritone Louis Quilico, Mr. Rigoletto, in conversation with Christina Petrowska Quilico. In this conversation, Louis shares stories of some memorable onstage mishaps.
The first performance was on the Friday. I arrived in New York and I was living with some friends, and all of a sudden I woke up and he said, "How are you?" And I went, nothing came out. I said, "My God, what is this?" And anyway, I was hoping that it would go away, and I didn't do much during the Saturday, and I waited. Anyway, Saturday passed. Sunday morning I wake up, all of a sudden, my friends, "How are you?" was even worse. All of a sudden, we called the company where I was doing the concert, and I said, "Please, can you arrange for me to see a doctor?" Because I said, no, I didn't say it, somebody else said it. And because I was too ill to do the performance. And they said, "Well, listen, you have to do the performance because there's nobody else that knows the opera." I says, "I know, but I got no voice. The voice is gone." Anyway, we're going to send you to a doctor. They got me to the doctor about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Finally, the doctor examined me, and he says, "When do you have to sing?" I said, I didn't say it. Somebody else said, "Tonight he has to sing." And all of a sudden he says, "No way, you have to cancel." I said, "I can't, doctor, because I really have to sing the performance." When he said like that, he says, "Listen, I'm going to do something for you." He says, "I don't know how much successful we're going to be, but do me a favor. what I'm going to do now, you go home, get yourself ready, go in Camigio, don't even try the voice. He says, when it's time, go on the stage. And when comes the time for you to sing, open your mouth and try to sing. If something comes out, you can thank God. If nothing comes out, there's nothing you can do about it. I went with that. And all of a sudden I had decided that I was going to cut, there was an aria in it. And I said I wanted to cut the aria to the conductor. But the conductor, Thomas Shepard, was kind of inhuman, I have to say. He was not my favorite conductor for that reason. He was a fabulous conductor, but as a man, he was not really a man. All of a sudden, he said to me, he said, "You're gonna sing the aria." But I said, "Tommy, I cannot sing the aria. I am too sick." He says, "If you don't sing it, I'm gonna make sure you're never gonna sing again in your life." He really threatened me. I said, well, when I saw that, I didn't say nothing to him, and he went, and all of a sudden we started the performance. And I finally started the performance, and the only thing you could hear it was, you feel the voice was not reacting and all that stuff. But the terrible thing that night, all of a sudden there was one place where I used to say, "Do you know who I am?" You know? And all of a sudden, right there from the corner of my eyes, who was in the hall? Mr. Rudolph Bing. I said, with this kind of voice, I understand, Mr. Bing, you're right. Anyway, the next day, I went back to see the doctor. And the doctor, he says, well, I'll talk to you after the third performance. I did the third performance. It was not too bad. The voice was coming back slowly. Anyway, I went to see him the day after the third performance, and all of a sudden he says, well, I will tell you now. He says, you should have given up singing at that moment. I says, why? Not give up singing, you should have sang the performance. Because you broke a blood vessel on the vocal cord. And this is why I always say, if somebody who's a singer is not 100% the night of a performance, quit. Because the thing is, it could be very dangerous. It could be dangerous for your voice, or it could be even dangerous for your reputation. I was lucky enough that the New York Times did not recognize me. They said there was the debut of a young baritone last night, Louis Quilico, and that was it. But they did not recognize that I had already sang in New York, you know. And that was my adventure with this one.
Mm. What about other things getting stuck in your throat? You have some stories on that.
Well, this one, I was in Santiago, Chile. And, well, there's quite a few times that it did happen because, for instance, the very first time that something happened in a concert, I was doing a concert. And I remember that was practically at the beginning of my career. And all of a sudden, I'm singing a song, and all of a sudden, I hear a lady in the hall. She goes, "Oh!" And she goes, "Oh!" And I go, and I'm choking to become blue. And finally, we finished the concert. And all of a sudden, the lady came backstage and she says, "Mr. Quilico, I'm so deeply sorry because the moment you were singing, and all of a sudden I looked from the ceiling, there was a dust that came down right in front of your face, and I was praying, God, please don't let him swallow it. And you swallow it." Mm-hmm. I said, "Yeah, you can say that again." It was very awkward, I have to say. Another place was in the mountain in Montreal. I was doing a concert, summer concert. And all of a sudden, during an aria, I don't remember, I swallow maybe a mosquito or, I don't know, a fly. Anyway, I choke on it too, you know. Yeah, we are susceptible to these things, you know.
Yeah, what about a feather?
Well, the feather is coming. I'm coming to that one. Oh, another place I went, I was doing Cavalleria Rusticana in Pagliacci. And during Cavalleria Rusticana, all of a sudden I started to tried to clear my throat, but there's nothing I could do. And it was terrible because I was not choking, but there was something tickling tremendously in my throat. And it used to drive me nuts. And I says, right after this, I've got to sing the Prologo Pagliacci. How am I going to do? Boom, boom, boom. Finally, after I finished the Cavalleria Ruscana, I went out. And I started to cough. I shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, you get so bloody nervous that you do it just the same. And all of a sudden, something came out in my mouth. And I took it out, and I looked at it. It was a piece of plastic. I says, what is that piece of plastic? And it took me about, I don't exactly remember how long it took me. But I realized that it was a bristle, we call?
Bristle.
A bristle of my toothbrush that was in my throat, because I must have brushed my teeth, and that thing must have caught in one of my tooth, and I did not feel it. Finally, it came out. But to come back to the feather, I was in Santiago, Chile, and all of a sudden we started to do the rehearsal of Rigoletto. Everything is going very, 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 very well. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting backstage the moment I'm going to sing the Cortigiani, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I walked on the stage without realizing what was going to be any problem. And all of a sudden, I open my mouth, and something goes wrong. I says, I don't know what it is. And I went on with the opera, and I was having trouble vocally. And I could not feel a tickling, but there was something right there that was disturbing me. I went on when I finished the opera finally. After the opera, I went back to the hotel, and all of a sudden, something started to tickle me in the throat, and I practically choked, and all of a sudden I cough, and all of a sudden a piece of thread, I would say about 3/4, practically maybe an inch long, but a piece of thread. I says, my God, look at this thing. That's the thing? And it was the thing that was disturbing me. And I put it on my dresser. In fact, if I remember well, I kept it and I put it in my scrapbook, you know. And all of a sudden, the next day, I noticed what it was. Because during the night, it dries up. Then all of a sudden, the feather open up. And that's why I noticed it was a feather. And my feeling is these old theater, they have birds that gets inside of the theater. And there must be a nest or something like that. And that's why it came down, you know. But that was my first performance. But my third performance was I would call it for myself a tragic one too. Because all of a sudden I went to have dinner just before the performance, and I had a soup, just a soup. And I remember the soup was very, very, very heavy. A lot of oil and everything. And all of a sudden, I went on the first time. Everything was perfect. The voice was responding and everything. Comes the moment to walk in to sing the Cortigiani, and I walked in, and all of a sudden, I open up a door, and I have to go down 3 steps. And I open the door, I go down 2 steps, and all of a sudden I look at the stage. The whole stage is moving around me. It's all going zzz, zzz. And it was terrible because I said, what is this thing? And all of a sudden I shook myself up, and it stopped. I walked down, and I started to walk, and I kept on going. And all of a sudden, the stage again starts to go, but this time even faster. And I don't know where to put my feet anymore. And right next to me, what I should have done, right next to me there was a seat. I could have sit there. No, I was supposed to go across. That's where the seat I was supposed to go. And all of a sudden I put my hand, and boom, I fell on the stage, and that was it. Not that I lost conscience, but I was completely dizzy. I couldn't stand on my 2 feet. Finally, they had to close the curtain because I couldn't go on with the performance for the moment. And all of a sudden, they took me to my dressing room. And I said, give me 2 minutes. I said, maybe that might pass or anything like that. finally there's a doctor that came in and gave me some shot, injection. And I don't know what it is he gave me, but I found out later. After a while, well, I came back and I was all right, and I walked on the stage and we finished the performance. But I found out through the great vein after that the doctor said I was a dope addict because he had given me doping, and that's why I needed doping. That's the reason. And I had never had a dope in my entire life, not even the smallest pill you can think about. But I don't know. They gave me this injection. But one of the things that I was very sorry after that is there was an old tenor that used to be famous for his Othello, Raymond Vinay, and he came to me. I was walking the street by myself because all of a sudden in your mind you say to yourself, well, maybe I cannot, there's something wrong, blah blah blah. Anyway, he walked and he found me in the city, and all of a sudden he walked to me and says, Louis, we're so deeply sorry about this and all that. He says, I says, well, what can you do? I says, there's something wrong, but I says, I don't know what it is. But he says, I'm going to tell you one thing. He says, I sang Othello for many years. And I realized after a while, I could not sing Othello. I got so mad. I said, Raymond, if it's the theater that sends you to tell me that, they're crucifying you. But if it comes from your mouth, you're the worst SOB I ever met. And I left him on that. About 2 months later, I was back in New York, and I had to do something like 25 performances of Rigoletto at City Opera. And I had about 4 or 5 different tenors. And I had 4 or 5 different reviews. And one review was better than the others. Anyway, I remember very well the first performance I did, I was thinking about it. I was thinking what he said. It's terrible what people can say to you. Anyway, all my reviews were very, very good. And what I did, I put them in an envelope and I sent it to him. And I says, Raymond, believe it or not, you might not believe these people, but I can tell you one thing. The public was completely crazy when I did the performance. And I can tell you one thing. You sang Othello once upon a time, but you're never going to sing it again. That's one thing I can be sure of that. And I saw him about maybe 4 or 5 years later. And the first thing I know, the moment he saw me, he grabbed me and started to cry on my shoulder. And he says, Louis, I'm so deeply sorry of what I said. I says, well, listen, Raymond. I says, we all make mistakes. I said, that was one of your mistakes. I says, I'm sorry for what I did, but you should have been sorry for what you did. I said, you cannot say to people these things. If people cannot understand themselves, well, listen, what can I tell you? Oh boy. Can we stop 2 minutes? To talk about little anecdotes, for instance. I was not part of the performance, but once upon a time, a very, quite famous French tenor has just joined the Paris Opera. And all of a sudden he was supposed to sing the usher in the third act. And the only thing he has to sing is Scudete il carcere monteronde. And the poor man was not very artistic. And all of a sudden came the moment, and all the people backstage, they said, well, Guy, don't worry about it, we will help you. I says, now when we're going to say go, you go and you count. 1, 2, 3, 4, turn and sing. Okay? Good. But we will tell you 4 measures before you have to go. All of a sudden came the famous performance, and Guy was waiting, and all of a sudden the the stage assistant started to count. Guy, be careful here now. 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And Guy started to walk. 1, 2, 3, 4. And he said, I turned, and the man behind me was singing already. He says, I could never sing my life. It was a funny thing. Like, for instance, I remember in one performance of mine, they brought a policeman that had been accepted at the Paris Opera, and he was doing exactly the same role. And this man had never walked in his entire life on a stage while the public is there, and with the scenery and everything. He was just coming at the last minute. Somebody else had done the performance already. Anyway, comes the moment of the poor gentleman to walk in, and all of a sudden, I remember very carefully, I turned around to watch him. And he came up to the middle of the stage the moment he turned around. And he saw the public. His mouth open, his eyes went big and blank, and he could not sing one word. Got so panicky, you know. I have to say one thing, you know, for the first time you walk on the stage, it's not easy. Because I tell you one thing, when you see all these people, especially if you know, you don't do a big role, but it's still you saying one line, it's very scary. Talking about stage fright or forgetting lines or anything like that, I remember very well doing the Trojans at the Met, and all of a sudden, it's not an opera I've done often, but you know, I had done already about maybe 5 or 6 performances. There was about a dozen performances. And all of a sudden came my aria, and all of a sudden I started my aria, and right in the middle of the aria, whoop, I got a complete blank. Now the soprano is right next to me. She turns towards me and she's going in my ear. She's giving me the words. Nothing. Apparently my face was so completely blank. And all of a sudden the what you call the prompter is giving me the words, and she's giving me the word, and nothing, and all of a sudden the conductor gets in the picture himself too, nothing. Finally, after about maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 measure, practically the end of the aria, all of a sudden it came back. And I have to say one thing, it was not scary because you don't do it on purpose, you know. But all of a sudden, the tragedy of this, it seems that at that moment, nothing wants to register. You want to do like you want to close up shop and say, no, I don't want to sing no more, you know. And that's the reason very often these things might happen with somebody that forgets the words, you know.
Does that happen often to many of the singers, or the prompters help so that the audience doesn't really know what's going on?
Well, I have to say one thing. The prompter is, I think I've already spoken about it, but the thing is the prompter is a very vital thing for some singers. Some singers, they cannot sing without the prompter. You know, they get lost completely. They will not, in fact, they will not go on the stage if there's not a prompter. Me, for a while, for quite a few years, I would say about 20 years, I prefer never to have a prompter because I couldn't make a mistake. But now it's happened that now I'm so used to the prompter that all of a sudden it seems that I need a prompter all the time too. And that can be scary because sometimes you go to do some performance where there's no prompter. And I'll tell you one thing, you have to brush up yourself about that, you know.
Well, the big stars have so many roles and they have so much pressure. How do they deal with it?
Well,
How do you deal with it?
I have to say one thing. You know, the pressure on them is tremendous, because when you figure one thing, they've learned so many opera, and the point is, during a year, there's so many opera that they have to do, that all of a sudden, if it's a new opera, especially with the new opera, they are so used to have a prompter, for instance, that if you take up the prompter, you can have a problem. I know for a fact that some artists, they won't walk on stage without a prompter. And Jan Peers, for instance, Jan Peers, when he used to do his concert, would have his little black book in his hand all during the concert. And his little black book was to follow the song, because he was afraid to make a mistake.
What about some extraneous noises that come from outside and out of doors performances?
Well, I can tell you one thing. I was doing, for instance, Rigoletto in Cincinnati, and in those years it was an open air in the zoo. And I remember very, very vividly, because it was so funny. Because even it was one of the most dramatic moments of the whole opera. But even with that, I was, as we say, laughing in my beard, because the soprano was singing a very dramatic moment at the end when she sings, La su in cielo. Up there in heaven, I will be with my mother, and that she's talking about that. And all of a sudden she goes, La su in cielo. And the peacock came in. That was funny. And there was another moment in the opera, I don't exactly remember what it was, but I remember all of a sudden it was the lion. Whoa! I tell you one thing, it's funny, but the most scary thing I've been part of, it was in Madrid, a place we used to do opera in the park, but it was a park, but there too they had what do you call the
zoo.
The zoo, and one night I was doing not one night, I did 4 performances.
Of what?
The Tale of Upman.
Oh.
And the 4th act, there was one place where I used to sing, Tu ne chanteras plus, sais-tu quel sacrifice s'impose ta jeunesse, et là tu mesurais. I used to sing that. And it was very strange, because my makeup was very white. I looked like death. I represented death. And all of a sudden, the only thing you could see was a very powerful spotlight that just take about half of my body here, and you could see only the head, more or less. And all of a sudden, I remember very well, and 4 nights, it's happened exactly the same place. I would sing, Tu ne chanteras plus, sais-tu quel sacrifice s'impose. The moment I would say s'impose, the wolf. Oh! 4 performances like this. There's a reason for that, because I'm possibly sure. I used to take this on one note, you know. Tu ne chanteras plus. And you have to make it very monotonous. It sounds like I said, it represents death. That's exactly what it's supposed to sound like. And I think it must irritate the wolf listening to that note, and that's why he would start that. And that was quite strange, I have to say.
Are there any other things happening in the theater? I mean, sometimes animals are brought into the opera performances. Aida, for example.
Well, we were doing once Manolesco in San Francisco, and all of a sudden there was one thing that I was very surprised to see how they do to clean the horse. Not to explain you, but it's a hell of a disgusting thing to think how they can clean the horse. And apparently they did that for one reason, because not in my actual performance, but a few performances before, they didn't clean the horse. And all of a sudden, the horse walked in with a buggy, and it went plop, 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 plop. And soprano never saw one of these plop, 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 plop. She put her feet in it, and she sat in the other one. And they had to stop the performance in reality. And what else did I? Oh, well, there's a famous story that has been said, Sir Thomas Beecham, doing a performance in Caracalla. And all of a sudden, the soprano was not too good, And he's conducting, and all of a sudden, during the rehearsal and all that, and all of a sudden, the horses and the elephant, I don't know which one, all of a sudden, they went plop, 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 and all of a sudden, they had to stop, because there was the army, they had to pass there. You cannot pass in these popo of the horses or anything like that. And all of a sudden, Sir Thomas Beecham asked, he says, what is the big trouble? I don't remember if it was Rome or Verona, it's one of the two. And all of a sudden they asked him what was wrong. And he said, he asked, what is wrong? Why we have to stop? And they explained about the pop, 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 pop. Oh, he says, gee whiz, we have the critics before the performance, because he did not like the soprano.
Yeah. What about things happening on the stage? Strange, funny things during rehearsals?
One of the funny, strange thing happened to me. I was doing an Aida in one of the Russian city when I went to Russia, and all of a sudden they give me a costume, and they give me one of the costume was very, very, very high skirt, right here, and naturally, well, you make up a little bit lower than the skirt, but you don't make up all the way, And I had my white underwear, and I like my legs, well, I up to my knees, and that's it. That's white. But then the rest is black, because that's what shows. Anyway, I wanted to impress the people, and all of a sudden I walked on the stage, and I took a very good breath, and I kept the moment, dunque tu sei suo padre, and I suo pa, and you hold that note, you hold it. And I did not realize that my stomach was going down, and all of a sudden the skirt fell. Boom. And my daughter was there. She says, Daddy, you had to see your face. It was incredible to watch your face. And the thing is, I was lucky enough to grab the skirt in the front. And I grabbed the skirt and I started to lift the skirt in the front. But the big problem was not the front anymore, was in the back, because it went, excuse the expression, just under my little bum, and it got cut there. I couldn't raise the skirt, and finally one of the ballet dancers saw me, so it was so awkward moment that he came in, and all of a sudden he talked, and finally he cut himself safety pin, and he pinned me down. But that, I have to say one thing, that was a very awkward moment in my career.